The Safe Food Foundation is urging the federal government to conduct a review of the use of genetically modified foods in Australia. A recent European study found that rats fed a GM diet over their lifespan suffered mammary tumours and severe liver and kidney damage.
Some scientists have criticised the study. Others say it can't be ignored. Scott Kinnear falls into that latter group. He's the director of the Safe Food Foundation. Good morning. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
The evidence against this study is quite overwhelming. Why do you think that it needs to be further investigated?
Well, I would challenge that. The evidence against the study is what we've seen with every scientist who has brought out adverse findings on genetically modified foods. They are attacked and vilified, and the criticisms that we've reviewed in the last 24 hours of the study simply don't stack up. The type of rats used are equating to the human lifespan. It's a 2-year study. Unfortunately, our regulators normally only use 90-day feeding trials. That's not long enough.
Yeah, let's backtrack a bit and we'll get to the controversy shortly.
Sure.
Just tell us exactly what this, what the actual link is between GM food and these experimental rats.
Well, the study looked at genetically modified corn, a particular variety. They fed it to rats. They found an alarming increase in tumours, in mammary glands in particular, and in liver and kidney damage. They've also looked at Roundup at very low doses and found the same damage in those rats from Roundup. So this study looks at both technologies.
Now, there are concerns raised that the rats, as the subject of these experiments, were particularly prone to developing tumours. The sample size was very small.
Yes.
I've done a fair bit of reading this morning
Yes.
on this, and I'm struggling to find scientists, prominent scientists, who are supporting what this French scientist has come up
Yes.
with. Am I wrong?
Yes.
Am I missing something here?
No, I'm glad you've raised that. This is an example of that vilification that takes place. And
it's not vilification. There were these other scientists offering their scientific views on what this guy has come up with.
Okay, so the response overnight has been that the variety used is one of the best varieties of rats to use because it equates very closely to human beings. It's also the variety that's used by industry to test for safety of genetically modified foods. We believe it was the same variety used by Monsanto in their own feeding studies, so it is appropriate to use this variety. What's important is the number of cancers, the increase in the number of cancers, and that was startling and alarming. So we're talking about 50% and 70% of cancers in 2 of the treated groups compared to 30% in the control group over 2 years. That's an alarming increase and it needs to be looked at.
But independent scientists have criticised the rats that have been used because they're saying that they have a tendency to develop cancers.
Well, that's exactly what I've just said. That yes, they do, but we've got to look at the increase in cancers. That's what's important. There's the control group here equates to the control groups in other studies. This group of rats, I stress, has been used for regulatory assessments of chemicals and genetically modified crops.
And again, we have Food Standards Australia, the relevant
Yes.
regulatory body here, restating its belief that there is no link between GM
Yes.
foods and
Yes.
cancers. Similar comments from the regulators in the United States, Japan, Canada and Europe.
What they tend to do is
our viewers watching, who are mainly lay people, based on that, all the established science versus what this guy's come up with, there are no prizes for guessing where most people would go here.
Look, it's understandable, but what we're looking at is 100 studies versus 1 study, but the 100 studies are very different. It's like comparing apples to oranges. 90-day feeding trials don't equate to 2-year feeding trials, and that's what we need to understand here. This particular research team, it's a €3 million study. It's a very expensive study. It's been developed over 5 years, and 2 years of actual feeding has taken place. We cannot ignore it. It's a study that goes right to the heart of the way we regulate chemicals and the way we regulate genetically modified foods, which has taken place since the Second World War, and it's seriously flawed. We look at active ingredients, not formulations. This study looked at Roundup as a formulation. It has additives which help the active ingredient. Glyphosate, we're all familiar with the 2 terms. It helps glyphosate get into the cells and do its work. We need to regulate and look at the actual chemicals that's put on our food. Roundup is 30 years out there, it's in drinking water, it's in our diet, we can't avoid it now, and this is an alarming bit of research for Roundup. This is one genetically modified food that's shown harm. We need to now look at the way we regulate and have tested all of the previous genetically modified foods. If the regulators ignore this, then what I would say to regulators is you're actually protecting the industry you regulate, you're not protecting the public.
Scott Kinnear, we thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.